everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting, our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from October 2nd, 2020, and I'm recording this on April 2nd, 2021. What we're doing here is trying to see what made these comics hot back then and how they've done since, so that we all can make a little better decisions about what books we chase, what books we're patient on, that kind of thing. We're looking back at the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week and the CBSI Hot Top 10. This week they had no overlap. I think this is the second week in like 3 weeks where we've had 20 books that we need to discuss. So we got a lot of books to talk about. So let's get into this week's list. So first up we have Black #1. This was optioned by... It had previously been optioned, but Warner Brothers bought the option rights to it, so a bunch of people were specking on this. It jumped up to a $30 to $40 book raw. But here's the thing: there was no director attached, no writer attached, so this is a long way off. And as a result, it's down a little bit, $20 to $30 now. But although there was a most recent sale supposedly for $90, but there was listings for $30. So I'm not sure what's going on there. That seems to be maybe a little fishy. That somebody paid $90 for it. Still almost all raw copies. There's still several copies out there. So this one's definitely down. Definitely kind of an I'll be back and not something you needed to chase back then. We'll say you'll notice there's no JP Said this week. This was a week I did not do a cash or trash. This was during football season, so I didn't get as many of them done. All right. Next, we're going to move. We got more kind of TV related news, and we have The Boys #24. This was actually on the other list last week. So it was on Tom's list this week, and this is the first appearance of Gee Whiz. And basically this, which is kind of a team, and there's several members of this team that also made their first appearance here. And this was basically reports that there was a potential spinoff show coming. Don't know if that's going to happen or not, but this book back then jumped up to a $45 to $60 book. Now it's a $15 to $30 book. So this one's been a bit of a trap. It's fallen back considerably from what it was back then. The Boys itself has been a big hit. We know there's a season 3 coming. I believe they've actually already said there's going to be a season 4. Don't know if they're actually going to have a spinoff or not, or if this is the direction they're going. But that was a rumor at the time. We'll see if it actually comes to fruition. But now the book is definitely much more affordable than it was back then. Next, we have The Autumnal #1. This is also second week in a row, also on opposite lists. This book was only in its second week of release. And Tom and Russ actually talked about that there appeared to be maybe a little bit of manipulation going on with this book. You'll notice I have it for $4 to $30 on the range. So basically when it first was coming out, it was going for like $30. There didn't seem to be a month. But as they started really showing up, a bunch of them were just sitting there, even though they were asking $20, $30. There were some sales as low as $4 or $5. So yeah. Not sure what was going on here. It seemed to be more available than really the market was supporting at that $30 price. And that's been the case since. It's down to a $5 to $10 book. There was only one 9.8 sale, $40. So this one definitely turned into a bit of a trap. Not sure if it was market manipulation or just people overeager and paying more than they probably should have. With that, we're going to move into covers. And we have, what do we got? 2, 4, 5 covers this week that we're going to talk about. And first up is a cover by a favorite artist of mine, and this is Vampirella #6. This is a Jenny Frison variant. All her Vampirella Red Sonja variants are pretty popular, kind of tough to find. They're out there, but they're not, not tons of them out there. This particular one jumped up and had a couple sales in the $70 range. Now it's going $25 to $75, so still a lot of interest in this book. Not quite what it was back then. $100 for 9.8, which is pretty cheap for like a $75 raw book, obviously. So people still love these Frison covers. They're still a little bit hard to get, but they're not supporting really high prices, at least not currently. Next, we have Savage Avengers #12, the Linnell Yu Secret variant. And this is just a good Conan cover. Like the regular cover, he's wearing a mask. And this one, you see actually all of Conan coming at you. And back then, the secret variant was going for $50 to $60 out the gate. Now, these secret variants, particularly the Marvel ones, unless there's some other key aspect to them, have not really held very well. And this is also the case with this one. It's down to a $15 to $25 book raw. So this one would turn into a bit of a trap. And there's only been 2 sales in that range. Actually, there's a $15 and a $25 sale. So only two sales. There's several of them out there. But this one definitely did not hold up, which is fairly typical for these secret variants. Next, we have Shang-Chi #1, and this is the Ruin variant. And basically, this one hit the list because the first appearance of Sister Hammer is in this book, which is Shang-Chi's sister. But she was also on the cover of this particular variant. That is why this one was kind of the hot variant. But here's the deal, and there's several these kind of things going on this week. I don't know what was going on with the 2 lists this week. But they didn't give any price for what this was going for. They just made a statement. This was CBSI. Just made a statement that it was going for as much as the 1 in 50. But they didn't say what the 1 in 50 was going for. So it's kind of hard to judge this one a little bit. But if it was going for 1 in 50 prices week of release, then you're thinking 50-ish bucks. But this one is down to a $5 to $10 book now. So I think this is definitely down from what it was then, and a bit of a trap. So definitely did not hold up. We'll see if something in the future happens with Sister Hammer. Maybe she's a part of the movie that we haven't heard about yet. We'll see where the Shang-Chi movies and stuff go. But so far, not a lot of value, not a lot of interest in this particular character. Next, we have Department of Truth #1. The Werther del Idera. I don't know exactly how you pronounce it. 1 in 100 variant. This is obviously a homage to his work on Something is Killing the Children. So that's where this variant is coming from. And back then, this 1 in 100 was going for 125 to 175. Really good for a 1 in 100 to be going over ratio. Still going 150 to 300 for raw copies. 9.8s are hitting $750 to $1,500. Wide range on sales, but they're selling. And they're going for, it's definitely a wide range, but seems to be going for, big money on all of these. This book has been straight cash. I think it has everything to do with, the series is pretty good itself, but then you combine it with having a homage to Something is Killing the Children, which is the hottest indie series of the moment, I think, without a doubt. And you see what's happening with the values. All right, our last kind of cover is Avengers #36. This is, we talked about like Avengers 33 a few months ago, when the Moon Knight cover hit the list. Couldn't really understand what was going on with it. CBSI didn't really know what was going on with this one either, but it was going for 15 to 20 out the gate. Whereas 34, 35, also part of the storyline, didn't really go for more money. Not sure what was going on there, but not sure this is really that spectacular of a Moon Knight cover, particularly this one. But raw copies now are 5 to 15, so still going over cover. 9.8 will cost you 30 to 70, which is a pretty wide range on a 9.8. So this one was definitely down. Definitely something to come back for. Still not sure exactly what all the interest was in this whole storyline and these Moon Knight covers, but apparently there was at least some. So with that, we're going to move into comic buzz, character buzz kind of stuff. And first up, we have Strange Academy #1. This has multiple firsts. Emily Bright. I forget the Dormammu kid's name. There's a bunch of firsts in this one. And back then, this was going for $50 plus for raw copies of the #1. Now, raw copies will cost you anywhere from $100 to $150. 9.8s are running $350 to $400. There's a lot of spec on this book. People think this is a prime target for eventually a Disney Plus show, and that these characters are going to show up. I don't think they're necessarily wrong, but it's definitely going for big money already, which is a little bit surprising how quickly this was jumped up. But there's a bunch of firsts, so there's a lot of potential with this book as well. So next we have Scooby-Doo, Where Are You #1, and this is another super confusing one as to why it was on the list and what's going on with it. So basically what happened was they were talking about this being the first comic appearance of Scooby-Doo and the gang, and they were talking about this issue, but then they gave no real explanation of why they thought it was hitting the list. But then they gave values for like sales of like number 14 and a 9.6 going for 3,800, number 7 and a 9.8 going for 2,900. It was like they didn't give any values for the number 1 issue. So best I could figure on this one is this is a book that there's not very many copies of this any of the books in the series that are slabbed or on the census. There appears to have been a bunch of sales in late September that somebody had gotten basically their run of this slabbed. They were all high grade and put them out there, and a bunch of them had went for basically record numbers or really high numbers because suddenly they showed up graded, which you can't. It's hard to find these books graded. So that's the best I could tell what was going on there. Right now, just number 1 will run you anywhere from $250 to $700 for a raw copy, depending on condition. There really hasn't been any slab sales since, for the most part. So I think there's just not a lot of these slabs, and so somebody had dumped a bunch on the market because they're rare. People rare in terms of slabbed. People jumped on them, and maybe just rare anyway. And they went for pretty big money. So I think that's what's going on there. That's the best I could interpret what was happening with that book, or with those books. Next, we're going to move into some DC TV. We are past halfway, or we're just past halfway now. Still got 10 books to go. First up, we have House of Secrets, number 92. First appearance of Swamp Thing. Monster book, straight cash book. We know this. Why did it hit the list with a little bit of a bump? Well, basically, the announcement that it was the series had been on their DC streaming service, it got canceled, and then basically the announcement that it was going to be brought back on the WB. I don't know if that's actually still going to happen. It may end up on HBO Max. I don't know what's going to happen there for sure. But anyway, the series was being brought back is what caused this book to jump a little bit. It was obviously already a big book. Raw copies were averaging around $1,000 at that time. A 7.5 went for $1,550. Now raw copies will run you anywhere from $500 to $1,000 depending on condition, but in a 7.5 has been basically $1,650 to $2,250 in recent sales. So that is what's going on with House of Secrets number 92. I know there's a lot of buzz around the current Swamp Thing series. It's probably also helping keeping this book going. Always, people love this book. Next, we have Batman Shadow of the Bat number 1. This is the first appearance of Victor Zsasz, and basically this hit the list because there were rumors that he was going to be joining the Batwoman show. Don't know if that happened or not. I'm not watching any of those CW shows anymore. But so back then, raw copies were going for 5 to 10, and you're like, is that hot? And I kind of agree with that. There's a ton of these out there. This was a big print run. There was a bunch of these in bags. So yeah, it's still going for 5 to 10. Back then, a 9.8 was going for 80. Now it's a 90 to 100, so basically in that same range for the most part. It was really just there was a big spike in sales, but it really didn't do anything to value, and you can see that it's still going for that same value range. Next, we're going to go with Booster Gold number 1. So this is the first appearance of Booster Gold, but it's also the first appearance of Blackguard. And this is the Pete Davidson's character in Suicide Squad, and we found out he was also going to be a part of the Peacemaker show. So that caused a little bit, but if you're going after this book, you should be going after it for the first appearance of Booster Gold, is my opinion. But anyway, that caused a little bit of a spike. Raw copies were going for $50. 9.8s were set in $250, $300. Raw copies are still setting in the $20 to $60 range, so pretty steady on raw copies. 9.8s are up to like $300 to $350, but there's not very many of those sales, not many of those to really push it. So I would say overall the book has been pretty steady just based on the vast majority of sales are raw copies. Next, we have Blue Beetle number 3. This is the first appearance of the modern take on Peacemaker, who's a very different kind of character than the original Silver Age Peacemaker. And that shows but here's the thing. So people were kind of jumping on this book. It was actually way down from when John Cena was originally announced as he was going to be Peacemaker. Even with this little spike, it was still way down from that. Because the version of John Cena that we're seeing in the trailers and we're seeing in the Suicide Squad movie does not appear to be this version. It appears to be that Silver Age version. So this book really hasn't been going for much. Even back then, it was the spike only caused it to jump to $15. A 9.8 was only going for $60. Still a $5 to $15 book. 9.8s are still going in that $60 range. So yeah, not a lot of interest here because it doesn't appear to be this is going to be the take on Peacemaker in the either the movie or the show. Next, we have Hawkman #1. This is the first solo Hawkman title, and this hit the list because there was a casting announcement for the Black Adam movie that Hawkman was going to appear in the Black Adam movie, and they had cast the role. So that's what caused a little bit of a jump here. Low-grade raw copies were averaging $200 to $300. A high-grade raw copy went for $1,000 back then. Right now, you can get raw copies mostly in the $100 to $150 range. A 7.0 went recently for $350, which is really the only higher grade slab sale to report. So that's why I'm reporting with that. That's pretty recent. So this one's back down. This is obviously not the first Hawkman. But it is his first solo series. So a good book, but just we'll see what kind of role he plays in the movie. If there's some movement on this later, but not necessarily the Hawkman book by any stretch of the imagination. With that, we're going to move out of DC. We actually had a bunch of DC stuff. And we're going to move into Disney Plus and Marvel related stuff. And first up, we have Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 16. First appearance of Monica Rambeau. This is his second week straight on the list. And this had to do with her appearance, obviously, in the WandaVision trailer. And then the fact that we've gotten WandaVision since. So we kind of know what's happened with this book. But back then, when we talked about it last week, it was an $80 raw book. 9.8s were $400. By this point, it had jumped up to a $600 book for a 9.8. Now, raw books, $60 to $150, but 9.8s are going for around $1,000. So this book is continuing to go up. Still very hot after the WandaVision show. Character that we know we are getting more of. And personally, I'm looking forward to it. I thought the actress did a great job. So next, we have Miss Marvel number 12. First appearance of Red Dagger. And this obviously is just pure spec on the Miss Marvel show, a character people think is going to appear. We don't really know yet if this character is going to be a part of that show. I think they've been filming for a while. They're probably getting close to wrapping before long, but still no news whether or not this is going to be a character that's involved. Back then, raw copies were going for $15. They put 9.8 with 28, but that went kind of before the announcement, and it was really one of the few 9.8 sales because there just weren't many 9.8 copies of this out there. So really probably an irrelevant number on that 9.8, but that was the number that they listed as they were talking about it. Now raw copies are still 10 to 25, mostly though around 15, so still kind of right in that same range. 9.8, there was only 7 on the census back then. So yeah, in this character, but anyway, now 9.8s are 100 to 130, but that's represented by only 2 sales. So stuck with steady on this one because of the raw value. Still not a lot of 9.8s out there floating around. Not a lot of them on the census. Next, we have Miss Marvel number 12. This is the 1 in 25 Joel Jones variant. This was already a pretty popular variant that was going for good value anyway, but this caused it to spike. Still the first appearance of Red Dagger. This caused this one to spike up to $160 plus for raw copies. And this one's dropped back a little bit. It's down to a $50 to $100 book. 9.8s are still going though $300 to $400. This is a fairly hard to track down book. They're out there, but there's not a ton of them. A cover that was popular even without being the first appearance of Red Dagger. We'll see if Red Dagger shows up. He is a potential love interest, so we'll see what happens there. Next, we have Strange Tales number 135. This is the first appearance of S.H.I.E.L.D, the organization, and it's also when Nick Fury joins up with S.H.I.E.L.D. So that's kind of how we're introduced to S.H.I.E.L.D, as Nick Fury joins S.H.I.E.L.D. And this is basically all rumors that Samuel L. Jackson was getting a Nick Fury show on Disney Plus. We didn't get any follow-up on that at the Disney shareholders meeting in the fall, so could still be happening, but we haven't got any more news, so this one has fallen back a little bit. So this was weird reporting. This was Tom and not CBSI this time, but they just basically were like, average sale $950, and I was like, raw, what kind of grade? That had to be a super high graded copy, or really just odd sale, because raw copies are going $75 to $200 for this. Now I realize there wasn't like a super high grade that I saw in those sales. So a super high grade might push $1,000, but doesn't really seem like an average number. An 8.5 can go for $530. So this one's back down, obviously from that announcement or that spec. Still a great book, still a really cool Silver Age Marvel book. So I think long term it's straight cash, but yeah, it's hard to know exactly what it's done because the value reporting on this one was kind of weird, even for them. So last book on the list is sort of related to, it's a Marvel book, but the character isn't actually owned by Marvel in terms of like their TV rights. And this is Conan the Barbarian, #1. And this is the first appearance of Conan in comics. And this is everything to do with the reports of a Netflix Conan the Barbarian show was coming. Back then, raw copies were going for $550 to $570. A 9.8 went for $6,000. Raw copies have dropped back a little bit, $150 to $450 depending on grade. But 9.8s are still in that same range. The most recent sale is $62.50 for a 9.8. So down a little bit in terms of raw copies, but again, a long-term great book. So that is this week's list. 20 books we had to get through, so I want to appreciate you guys for sticking with me. And we'll catch you next time.